The little girl was standing close enough to my knee that I could hear her breathing through her mouth, the way children do when they're concentrating. "My mum has your picture on her phone," she said. "You look happy in it." I had a paper cup of coffee in one hand. The pond was doing what it does at 7:20 in the morning, throwing back a flat white sky. Two mallards were working the reeds. I'd been walking that loop 4 mornings a week since June, and in all that time, nobody at that park had spoken to me, except a man with a beagle who likes to talk about the weather. I looked down at her. She had a lunch bag full of oats and a purple coat with the hood pushed back. "Does she?" I said. 31 years on, a dispatch console teaches you two useful things. One is that people tell you the important part first, and then talk for 4 minutes about the driveway. The other is that if you want the rest of it, you don't ask a question. You leave a space and let them fill it. She filled it. She's had it since Easter. I remember the cup getting lighter in my hand. That makes no sense, but that's what I remember. Easter was the first Sunday in April. It was the 23rd of September. A 6-year-old doesn't know April from August. She knows Easter. She knows the day she got a basket with plastic grass in it, and she knows the picture was on the phone that day, because everything in her life is filed next to a holiday. "That's a long time," I said. "Sadie." Her mother's voice came from the bench, and it came fast. Faster than you call a child standing 8 feet away from you in an empty park. The girl turned and went, scattering oats as she walked, and the ducks came up out of the reeds after her. I stood where I was and looked at the bench. She was maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back, a canvas tote, a phone lying face down on her knee. She smiled at me, the way you smile at somebody else's grandmother. And then she looked at the water. Here's the part I keep coming back to. I had seen that woman on that bench since April. I had filed her away, the way you file anything you see, often enough. The young mum, the little one who feeds the ducks. And in 5 months I had never spoken one word to her. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her child's name until 3 minutes ago. And she had a photograph of me. I finished the loop. I want to be honest about that, because I've thought about it since. I didn't run to my car. I didn't march over and demand anything. I walked my 3/4 of a mile the way I always do, past the north bank, past the bare place where the fishermen stand. And when I came around to the parking lot, I did what I've done automatically for 30 years. I looked at the vehicles. 9 cars. A landscaping truck. And in the third row, a grey Corolla, older model, with the left taillight cracked and a strip of red tape over the brake. I'd like to tell you that meant nothing to me. It meant something to me. I had seen that taillight on Delmar Street. Delmar Street is where I live. I rent the north half of a duplex there, the side with the good morning light and the bad water pressure. And I had seen that car parked down the block on a Sunday. Sunday is not a park day. Sunday is groceries at 2 o'clock, and then nothing. I got in my car and sat with my hands on the wheel for a minute. Then I did the arithmetic that runs under everything I've done since I was 26 years old. Not what does this mean, what came first. Easter came first. I should probably tell you who I am, since I've made you stand at a pond for 4 minutes. My name is Marguerite Delaney. Most people call me Margot. I'm 68. I took emergency calls for the county for 31 years and retired at 57. And the only thing I miss is the headset, which nobody believes. I walk the loop at Wilder Creek at 7. I'm at Ridgeline Terrace on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 because my mother lives there, Alma. She's 91. She's been in memory care for 4 years, and on a good day she knows my face. On the other days, she's very polite to me, which is worse. The medication chart on the wall of her room is in my handwriting. So is the intake sheet, and the dental authorization, and the benefits recertification that comes due every February, and takes 9 hours and 2 phone calls to a woman in Jefferson City. I've handled all of it for 11 years. My sister, Corinne, has never once had to ask me twice for anything. And in April, I'm leaving. Not running off. Not a whim, whatever anybody says later. My friend Bev Halloran and I put in for a volunteer host season at a campground on Bull Shoals Lake, down in Arkansas. You get a site, a hookup, a shift schedule, and a lake you're not responsible for. Start date is the 1st of April. I've had those dates written on the inside cover of a notepad since the spring. That's the day. That's the one I want you to hold on to. I drove home, put the coffee cup in the sink, and told myself a reasonable story, which is what reasonable people do. Somebody screenshotted a church directory. Somebody's mother knew me from the county. There are 4 or 5 ordinary explanations for a stranger having your face, and I picked the one that let me put a load of towels in. I didn't think about it again until 6:40 that evening, when my sister called. She calls most nights. She has for years. "Did you get out for your walk today?" Corinne said. "I did." "Are you eating?" "I'm eating." "Did you sleep all right?" I said I did. We talked about the flooring showroom and a customer who wanted maple and cried about it. She said Gary sends his love. It was a nice call. I want to be clear about that. It was a completely nice call. Then I hung up, and the notepad was sitting on the counter by the toaster where it always is. I wrote C, 6:40, in the left margin, because I have written the time in the left margin of everything since I was 26 years old, and I couldn't stop if I wanted to. And my hand was already moving to flip the page back. I don't know why. I want to say I suspected something. I didn't. It was the same reflex that made me count the cars. I went back a week, then a month, then further. C, 6:41. Walk, eating, sleeping. C, 6:38. Walk, eating, sleeping. C, 6:44. Walk, eating, sleeping. Every evening, the same 3 questions, in the same order, in my own handwriting. All the way back to the last week of April. I sat down at the kitchen table with 3 more notepads out of the drawer, and I told myself I was doing this to prove nothing was happening. That's the truth. I wasn't investigating my sister. I was reassuring myself, the way you check the stove twice. I keep them until they're full, then put a rubber band around them and stack them in the drawer under the phone book nobody has used since 2009. Grocery lists, appointment times, what Alma ate, anything I might be asked about later. That habit cost me nothing for 40 years, and I never once thought about why I had it. I found the seam faster than I wanted to. April 20th, C, 7:05. Gary's back, showroom's slow, ordinary. April 21st, 6:40 in the evening, in my own hand, told C about Bull Shoals. April 1st, she was quiet. She was quiet. I remembered that. I'd told myself she was tired. April 22nd, nothing. April 23rd, nothing. April 25th, C, 6:39. Walk, eating, sleeping. And then every night after that, for 5 months, like a metronome. I turned pages for a while without reading them, just to feel the paper move. And somewhere in the middle of the stack, I went past a page from early September with a time written in the left margin, 3:18 in the morning, and nothing after it, no words. Just the time, and then white paper the whole way down. I turned past it. I know what that one is. I've written it every year since 2004, and I have never once put anything next to it. I put the rubber band back on and stood at the sink a while, and I decided that a woman who calls her sister every night to ask if she's eating is a woman who loves her sister. That's what I decided. I'd like the record to show that I gave her that. 2 days later, she gave me the first correction. We were on the phone about the dental authorization, and out of nowhere, in the mildest voice you can imagine, she said, "You told me you missed Mom's appointment in July." "I didn't miss it." "You said you did, on the phone. You said you'd gotten the day wrong." There's a thing that happens in your chest when somebody hands you a version of yourself you don't recognize. It isn't anger. It's more like reaching for a step that isn't there. July 15th, I said. I was there at 9:40. Dr. Boyd, the hygienist with the tattoo. She said Mom's lower plate needed a reline. Well, Corinne said, maybe I'm mixing it up. 9:40. It's in the margin. I could have walked to the drawer and read it to her. I didn't. I said maybe she was, and we moved on to whether the reline was covered. That's the part I'd change. If I got to change one thing, not anything I did later. That. Gary came by on a Sunday. My brother-in-law is a large, quiet man who has sold flooring for 26 years and has never in his life started a conversation he wasn't sent to start. He brought a bag of tomatoes from his garden that were 3 days past good. He sat at my table, turned his coffee cup around twice, and took a folded piece of paper out of his shirt pocket. It was a floor plan, drawn to scale, printed off somebody's software. The Ellendale garage with a wall down the middle, a 3/4 bath in the back corner, a kitchenette along the north side, and a ramp coming off the side door to the driveway. Corinne had a fella from work price it out, he said. He was looking at the tomatoes. Just so you know the options there. The options there. For what, Gary? For whenever. He turned the cup again. No pressure from anybody. Corinne was in the car in my driveway. I could see her through the window over the sink. She didn't come in. A ramp. I have all my knees and both hips, and I walk 3/4 of a mile before most people are awake. Somebody had priced out a ramp. I put the paper on the counter under the fruit bowl, and I didn't bring it up with my sister. If you want to know why, I have to take you back further than any of this. Our father died in the spring of 1991. I was 33 and 28 days off the console after a bad stretch. I sat in a funeral home on Glenstone with a man named Dwyer and picked out a casket and a plot and the words on the stone, and Corinne sat in the parking lot in her Escort with the windows up for 2 hours and 11 minutes. She was 27. She couldn't come in. I never once held it against her. She has never been able to be in a room where our mother is unhappy. Not when we were girls, not at the funeral, not now. Alma was hard on her and soft on me, and neither of us ever said that out loud in 50 years. Corinne has been paying interest on it her whole life, while I collected. So when Alma's diagnosis came, it wasn't a discussion. It was arithmetic. I was retired. I had no children. I had a headset voice and a talent for paperwork, and my sister's hands shook in that building. I took it, all of it, for 11 years. And here's the thing I've never said to anybody, and I'm going to say it once. I never told her it was hard. Not once. Not the recertification. Not the 2 a.m. calls. Not the afternoon. Alma asked me who was going to tell Marguerite that her mother was in a home. I let Corinne believe it cost me nothing, because if it cost me nothing, then I was the one who could do it. And being the one who could do it was the only thing I've ever had that was mine. You can't hand somebody a lie for 11 years and then be surprised when they believe it. Bev called that Wednesday. They want us in a week early for orientation, she said. First week of April. And I'm telling you now, Marguerite, I am not drinking your coffee for 6 months. You make it like a dispatcher. That's a compliment. It is not. We talked 40 minutes about generator hookups and whether the site had a shade tree, and a man named Hollis, who apparently runs the fish cleaning station like a small country. I laughed twice. Nobody asked me if I was eating. I hung up, feeling better than I'd felt in a week. I want you to notice that. It was the last easy conversation I had for a while. Thursday, I went back to the pond and did the thing I'd been avoiding for 5 months. I sat down on the other end of her bench. Her name was Raina. She said it before I asked, which I noticed. Sadie was down at the water with a bag of oats and a plan. Your daughter told me you have my picture. I watched her face. 31 years of listening to people decide what to tell me, and I still got it wrong. You dispatched the call when my brother went through the ice at Fellows Lake, she said. 2011. He was 14. She was looking at Sadie, not at me. My mom kept your name for years. She kept the number you told her to call after. My eyes went hot and I hated it. It happens. Not often, but it happens. A woman in a grocery store. A man at the tire place. You take 15,000 calls, and a few of them keep walking around in the world. I'm sorry, I said. About your brother? He's fine. He's in Rolla. He has a boy now. And I believed her. God help me. I believed her. And I let 6 days go by. I brought Sadie a bag of cracked corn on the Monday because oats swell in a duck's crop, and somebody had to tell her. She was scandalized. She made me swear I hadn't hurt them already. Raina laughed at that. A real laugh, hand over her mouth. We sat on the bench and watched a 6-year-old renegotiate her entire relationship with the pond. And I want to be exact about this. It was a good morning, one of the good ones. On the 6th day, I asked, easy as asking about a recipe, "Would you let me see it, the picture your mother kept?" Her hand stopped on her phone. It stopped for about 2 seconds. I've spent a long time thinking about what happened in those 2 seconds. Then she turned the screen around. It wasn't a newspaper clipping. It wasn't a county badge photo. It was me at my own stove, apron on, laughing at something out of the frame. Thanksgiving. And over my shoulder, cropped down to a sliver, but as familiar to me as my own hands, was the yellow face of my mother's kitchen clock. I said, "Thank you." That's what I said. I looked at my own face on a stranger's phone and I said, "Thank you." I stood up. I walked to my car at a normal speed, and I did not look back at that bench. The clock hung in my kitchen on Delmar Street. It came out of my mother's house on Cherry when we cleared it 4 years ago. A yellow plastic sunburst from about 1971, with a crack running up through the 7. It's the least valuable thing I own. Nobody outside my family has ever stood in a room with that clock. I got home and scrolled back 2 years in my phone and found it. Thanksgiving. Corinne took it and sent it that night. I'm at the stove with my back half turned. Gary's elbow is in the corner of the frame, and there's a roasting pan on the counter with foil over it. The picture on Raina's phone was the same picture with the elbow gone. The pan gone. The counter gone. Just my face, and enough of the wall behind me to keep the clock. Somebody had cropped my brother-in-law out and left my mother's clock in. 4 people had that photograph. Me, Corinne, Gary, and Nadine, who was Mom's aide before Ridgeline, who moved to Tulsa the same year and sends a card at Christmas. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand for a long time. I did not call my sister. People have asked me since why I didn't pick up the phone that afternoon and have it out. I spent 31 years learning not to. You don't act on the first 60 seconds of a call. The first 60 seconds is a man screaming that his wife isn't breathing. Half the time she's breathing. The other half. There's a second person in the house. Nobody's mentioned yet. You get the whole call. You get the whole call, and then you decide. So I put the phone face down and I went to Ridgeline on Tuesday, like it was a Tuesday. And Tuesday was a good day. You can't predict them. Alma was in the sunroom in the blue cardigan, and she looked up when I came in and said, "There she is," the way she used to say it when I came home from a shift. My chest opened up like a window. Corinne got there at 10:15, on her break, still wearing the name badge. She stood in the doorway the way she always does, half in the hall. Alma looked at her and said her name. Said Corinne, correctly, first try, and I watched my sister's whole body change. We got 20 minutes. Alma told us about a dog she had in 1954. And then Corinne, for reasons I'll never know, started singing our father's car trip song. That awful thing he made up on the way to Table Rock with about 40 verses. all of them about the same badly built vehicle. Alma came in on the second line. 8 bars, maybe, word for word. Corinne laughed until she had to sit down on the ottoman with her hand over her eyes. I have that. Whatever happened after, I have that morning, and nobody can take it out of the file. She left at 10:40. I stayed another hour. And when I came out to the lot, her black Equinox was still parked in the third row, facing the retention pond. And my sister was inside it with both hands on the wheel, crying. Not delicately. The way you cry when you've held it since the parking lot. I stood by my car with my keys in my hand. Go over there, Margot. It's 30 feet. And I didn't go. I got in my car, I backed out, and I drove home. If you want to know the exact shape of what's wrong with me, that's it. I'll sit with a stranger on a phone line while her husband dies. I've talked a man down off the Kearney overpass, and I could not walk 30 feet across a parking lot and ask my own sister what was the matter, because I was afraid of the answer. 20 minutes. That's how far I was from all of this being different. Dana Whitlock called me Thursday afternoon. Dana is the care coordinator at Ridgeline. She's about 40. She talks fast, and she has never once made me repeat myself. 2 things, she said. Dr. Nasser wants to move your mother's trazodone to 8 instead of 9. They think that's the sundowning window. Nothing dramatic. And I want to update the file while I've got you. Go ahead. So, since your sister mentioned back in the spring that you'd been having some trouble keeping the schedule straight, should we start copying her on medication changes? Or is that not necessary? The refrigerator was running. I remember the refrigerator running. Dana, I said, what date did that go in the file? A pause with typing in it. June 3rd. Would you read me the note? A longer pause. And this one had a decision in it. Dana's a good person, and she's been doing this long enough to hear when a question isn't administrative. It says Sister C. Vasek reports patient's daughter, M. Delaney, experiencing difficulty maintaining schedule, requests to be kept apprised. 1 sentence. I have written thousands of 1-sentence notes. I know exactly what they're for. A note like that doesn't do anything. It just sits in a file, quiet as a nail. And then in 6 months or 2 years, somebody in a meeting says, well, there's been concern noted since June, and every single thing you have ever said becomes something to be weighed. Margot? I'm here. No, don't copy her. Everything comes to me. Okay. Careful. Is there anything I should? Not yet. All right. And then, because she is who she is, she also asked me in July for the reimbursement records. The whole 11 years. I sent what I had. I assumed you knew. Sure, I said. That's fine. I hung up and stood in my kitchen looking at that yellow clock, and everything turned over. The reimbursement records. Because that changed the shape of it entirely. A note about a schedule is one thing. A note about a schedule, plus 11 years of every dollar I ever spent on our mother, is not a concern about my memory. That's a case. I control the money. That's the plain fact of it. Alma's account, the automatic draft to Ridgeline, the aid hours, the incidentals, the Christmas gifts I buy from both of us. 11 years of me at that table with a shoebox and a calculator, putting back every month what I fronted, writing all of it down, because I write everything down. And in July, my sister asked for all of it. And in June, she put a sentence about my judgment in a file at the facility. And since Easter, a woman I had never spoken to had been sitting on a bench, watching me walk around a pond with my picture on her phone. Somebody was building something about money. I was that certain. I stood there and felt the whole thing lock into place, and it made me colder than anything had yet. Because I have never in my life taken a dollar that wasn't mine, and that is the easiest accusation in the world to make, and the hardest one to unmake. I called Bev. Not for help. I wanted somebody who sat in the same chair I sat in to tell me I was reading it wrong. I told her about Dana's note. Just that. And Bev went quiet. Bev Halloran has never been quiet in her life. 22 years on a console in Greene County. She talks over sirens. Bev. Oh, hell, she said. What? Marguerite. What? Your sister called me in July. Her voice had gone flat and careful, and I heard her set something down. The 14th. It's on my calendar because I wrote Corinne V on it and then never called her back. She said you hadn't been yourself since the spring. She said, Bev stopped. She asked me not to push the host program this year. Her words. She said, let's not have her sign up for anything until we know what we're dealing with. The refrigerator was still running. That was 10 weeks ago, I said. I know when it was. You've talked to me twice a week for 10 weeks. I know that too. I got off the phone. I got a clean notepad out of the drawer, the good kind with the stiff back, and I sat down at the table and wrote the date at the top and the time in the left margin. 4:17. The way I've started every log I've ever kept. And then, for the first time in 68 years, I started building a timeline against my own family. I'm not going to give you her messages. She said it before I finished the sentence. I'd gotten about 4 words in. I know who's paying you. And Raina put her hand flat on her knee and said it, looking straight ahead at the water, like she'd had it ready for a while. It was a Tuesday, cold enough that Sadie had her hood up. 22 weeks that woman had been sitting on that bench, and I'd brought her a cup of coffee. She took it. She didn't drink it. I know, I said. You don't. You think if you sit here long enough, I'll turn the phone around again. I brought you coffee. You brought me coffee because it's 41 degrees and you're a decent person, and you also thought it might help. She almost smiled. Both those things are true at the same time. My mother was like that. I told her about the photograph, where it was taken, whose kitchen, that the yellow thing over my shoulder was my mother's clock. And my mother is 91 and lives in a memory care unit on Battlefield Road. And that 4 people on this earth had that picture before somebody cut a man's elbow out of it. She listened to all of it without moving. Then she put both hands over her face for a second and took them away. She told me it was a wellness thing, she said. That's the word she used, wellness. That you'd been going downhill and you were proud about it, and the family needed to know if you were managing. She shook her head slowly. And I sat here and watched you feed my kid, and I kept thinking, she's fine. She's completely fine. And I kept taking the money anyway. Raina. No, don't do that. Sharp. I took it. That's mine to live with. It isn't yours to have. And I let it go. That surprised me, honestly. Every part of me wanted to push, and I didn't, because 31 years on a headset teaches you the exact sound. A person makes one question before they hang up. And she was making it. So I asked her the only things I thought she'd answer. Did she give you a name? Corinne. When does she pay you? Fridays. How much? 60. Sadie came up the bank with an empty bag and told us a goose had been rude to her, and we agreed that geese are like that. And then Raina said, without me asking anything at all, in a voice that had clearly been sitting in her for months. She told me not to mention it. She said, you get defensive about it. I sat in my car in that lot for 11 minutes. $60 every Friday since Easter. I counted it out on the steering wheel with my thumb. The last Friday in April and every one after, all the way to the Friday just gone. 22. $1,320. In March, I'd asked Corinne whether she could take on $240 a month for the extra aid hours, because Alma had started needing help with the evening meal. And Corinne said the showroom was slow and Gary's back had cost them 8 weeks, and she was so sorry, Margot. She just couldn't right now. I've never been good at leaving numbers alone. I did that one twice, and then I stopped, because I could feel what was underneath it, and I wasn't ready to look at it yet. Before I left, I tore a page out of the notepad, wrote my number on it, and walked it back to the bench. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "But whatever you write down from here on, write the time next to it, in the margin, left side." She took the paper. "Why?" "Because in 6 months you won't remember what you meant, but you'll remember what time it was, and everything else comes back off that." That's the last useful thing I ever said to her. Then I went home and spent 2 days building the wrong defense. I want to walk you through it, because it's the most honest thing I can tell you about myself. I got the shoebox down. 11 years of it. The reimbursement log, the ledger, the spiral books, the receipts in envelopes by year with the year written on the front in marker. I cleared the kitchen table and laid it all out and worked the way I used to work. A bad shift, one line at a time, no jumping ahead. 2015 through this September. Every dollar out of Alma's account. Every dollar I fronted. Every reimbursement, dated. The month I put in 1,100 for the dental work and took back 400 because I'd spent the rest on her glasses and decided not to bother. The Christmases. The $40 a month of hard candy and hand lotion, and the good tissues that don't feel like sandpaper, which came out of my pocket for 11 years and never went in the log at all, because I never counted that as her money. By the second evening, I had it. Every column reconciled. You could have put me in a room with an accountant and my sister's attorney, and I'd have sat there 6 hours without blinking. And then I set it next to the timeline. I had the timeline on the good notepad, in the order things happened, which is the only order that ever tells you anything. March. Corinne says she can't do the 2:40. April 21st, 6:40. I tell her about Bull Shoals. April 25th, the questions start. Easter, and then the Friday after. The photograph and the $60. June 3rd. Difficulty maintaining schedule. July 14th. Let's not have her sign up for anything. July. The reimbursement records. I read it 3 times before I saw it. There isn't a dollar figure anywhere in it. June 3rd was about a schedule. July 14th was about signing up for a campground. The questions every night for 5 months were, did you walk? Did you eat? Did you sleep? And a woman had been paid $1,300 to sit at a pond and write down. What? What had I done at that pond? I fed ducks with a 6-year-old. I watched a green heron work the shallows. I sat on a bench. Nobody was auditing me. Nobody had looked at a single dollar. She'd asked for 11 years of records, and I don't believe she ever opened the envelope. I had spent 2 days at that table, proving I hadn't stolen anything, and no one had ever said I did. I sat back in the chair and laughed once, out loud, in an empty kitchen, and it was not a good sound. Because that's my whole life in one motion, isn't it? Somebody comes at me sideways and I go straight to the ledger. I get out the receipts and I prove I did the work. 50 years of answering a charge nobody ever filed. They didn't think I was a thief. They thought I was going. And they were building a reason I couldn't. I called Bev Friday morning. You should have told me in July. I know. That was all of it. Neither of us has ever needed a second pass at anything. Then I made 3 calls in one afternoon, and I didn't tell a living soul. The first was to Dana Whitlock. I asked her to change the primary contact and responsible party on my mother's file, from me to Corinne Vasic, effective the 1st of October. I gave her Corinne's cell, the showroom line, and the address on Ellendale. Dana asked me twice if I was sure. I said I was, and I asked her to confirm it to me in writing. She did, at 4:51 that afternoon. The second was to my landlord. I drove the notice over instead of mailing it. 60 days on the north half of the Delmar duplex, dated the 30th of September, signed. He wrote, received on my copy in ballpoint. The third wasn't a call. It was the host application for Bull Shoals. which had been sitting in the drawer under the notepad since the second week of July, filled out and unsigned. I signed it. I put it in the envelope with the medical form and the copy of my license, and I drove it to the box on Sunshine and put it in myself, and stood there a second, with my hand still on the handle like a fool. Start date, April 1st. Then I sat in my car in the post office lot with the engine off. I thought I would cry. I've cried over less than this. I've cried over a dog food commercial. I sat there and waited for it, and it didn't come. After a while, I turned the key, drove home, and made a grilled cheese. She called at 6:52. Did you get out for your walk today? Are you eating? Did you sleep all right? Yes, mostly. So Mom's birthday is the 18th, she said. 92. I thought we'd do it here, instead of dragging her out. Gary's taking the day off. I'll get her that lemon thing she likes. A pause. A couple of people might stop by. That's nice. Come at noon instead of 1, would you? All right, I said. I hung up and wrote C, 6:52 in the left margin. And underneath it I wrote, noon. Why noon? I drove to Ellendale on the 17th, the day before. I hadn't planned it that morning. I'd planned it around 3 in the afternoon on the 16th, standing in front of the yellow clock. And then I made myself wait a full day, to be sure it wasn't temper. Gary opened the door. He looked at my face, and then at a point somewhere past my left shoulder, and he did not look back. He'd known since June. I'd find that out later. Standing there, all I knew was that a man who has never once been afraid of me couldn't get his eyes up off the porch boards. She's in the kitchen, he said. From the kitchen doorway you can see straight into the garage. The door was up. Half the boxes were gone, the ones that had been stacked along that wall since they moved in 20 years ago. The floor was swept, and against the back wall there was a pallet of unopened bathroom fixtures still in the shrink wrap. A vanity, a toilet in a box. Corinne was at the sink with her back to me, drying a pan. I sat down at her table. I didn't open with an accusation, because an accusation gives a person something to argue with. And I hadn't come to argue. I'd come to get the whole call. Tell me what's happening tomorrow at noon. She stopped drying. She stood there with the pan in her hands for maybe 4 seconds. And then she set it down and said, "Oh, thank God." That's what she said. Relief. It came out of her the way air comes out of a tire. I have been sick about this for 2 weeks, she said. I didn't want to do it in front of anybody. I thought, if it was people who love you, it wouldn't feel like an ambush. Margot, I'm glad you asked. I'm actually glad. She went into the front room. I heard a closet. She came back with a 3-ring binder. She set it on the table in front of me, like a woman putting down a casserole. It was full, not padded, full. 22 weeks of printed pages, hole-punched, in order, dated entries. Somebody had typed them up from handwriting and cleaned up the spelling. And on top, loose, a 2-page letter in 12-point type, with a paragraph crossed out in pen and rewritten in the margin. She'd revised it. She'd revised it at least twice. Denise and Karen are coming at noon, she said. That's all, nobody else. I wanted it to be people you love. She sat down across from me. I wasn't going to spring it on you. I was going to let you read it, and then we'd all just talk. At my mother's 92nd birthday, I put my hand flat on the binder and left it there. When did you decide I wasn't well? And she told me. March, she said. Mum called me. Their refrigerator hums too. I remember noticing that. She was Margot. She was crying so hard I couldn't understand her for the first minute. She said you'd stopped coming. She said nobody had been to see her in weeks, and she didn't know what she'd done. She said your name over and over. Corinne's hands were flat on the table. She knew who she was talking about. She knew it was you. What day was that? The 12th. I was there 90 minutes that afternoon, I said. 1:40 to 3:10. She had the chicken and rice, she wouldn't eat the carrots, and I sat with her through most of a game show. I know that now. You could have known it that day. I know. One phone call, Corinne. 2 sentences. Were you at Mom's on Wednesday? I know. And there it was. The whole thing. So much smaller than anything I'd built in my kitchen, and so much worse. My mother, who can't hold 10 minutes in her hands, made a phone call. And my sister believed her. And never once, in 7 months, asked me. I've thought about that a great deal since. There's nobody to be angry at in it. You can't be angry at a 91-year-old woman for something she didn't know, she said, doesn't remember saying, and would be destroyed to hear about. That accusation has no author. It just went off in the middle of my family like a dropped glass, and we're all still walking around in it. I opened the binder. Entry 9, August 7th. Subject remained seated on the east bench 40 minutes without moving or reading. I took my spiral notepad out of my bag, set it beside the binder, and turned to the 7th of August. 7:41, I read. Green Heron, North Bank, working the shallows. Corinne didn't say anything. He fishes that shallow corner where the runoff comes in. He stands still for 6-7 minutes at a stretch, and then he goes. If you move, he goes. I looked up at her. I've been watching him since June. I never told anybody about him, including you, because he's mine. She was looking at the page. Then I turned to the 17th entry, and she saw me do it, and something went out of her face. Entry 17, September 9th. Subject sat in her car crying approximately 11 minutes before entering the building. September 9th, I said. Margot. In 2004, I took a call at 3:18 in the morning, September the 9th. I kept my voice where it lives. A woman named Paulette, on Kimbrough. I was on the line with her 19 minutes. I did everything right, and it didn't matter. And I have written that time down every September 9th for 22 years, and I have never put a single word next to it. Corinne's mouth was open slightly. You've never heard about that call. Nobody has. Gary hasn't. Bev hasn't. My ex-husband didn't. I closed the notepad. 11 minutes in a car on the 9th of September isn't a symptom. It's an anniversary. You'd have known that if you'd ever once asked me what any of this cost. You never said anything was hard. No, I said. I didn't. That one's mine, and I'll carry it. And then I said the only sentence I'd prepared. I said it quietly, because it wasn't for winning. You wrote down what I did. I wrote down why. She didn't argue with a single fact. That's what I want on the record about my sister. She didn't say the entries were wrong. She didn't say I was misremembering. She didn't reach for any of it. She put her hands over her mouth, and from behind them she said, "You were leaving." Yes. You were going to leave me alone with her. There it was. 50 years of it, out on a kitchen table in about 4 words. Our mother, who was hard on her and soft on me, and never knew she was doing either. A 27-year-old sitting in an escort in a funeral home parking lot for 2 hours and 11 minutes. A 61-year-old woman who can't get past the doorway of a room on Battlefield Road, standing there in her name badge, with her hands going. I didn't tell her it was all right. It wasn't all right. She hired a woman with a 6-year-old to write down how long I sat on a bench. But I understood it, and I'm not going to pretend to you that I didn't. Corinne, I said, there are some things you need to know before tomorrow. Okay. Ridgeline changed the primary contact on Mom's file to you. That was effective the 1st. She looked up. The call you got on the 6th, I said, about the flu shot consent. That was a mistake. They said the file was. She stopped. They didn't say it was a mistake. I said it was a mistake. It wasn't. Margot. I gave notice on Delmar on the 30th, 60 days. I stood up and put the notepad back in my bag, and Bull Shoals accepted me on the 10th, April 1st. She sat there. I want to be clear that I took no pleasure in it. People assume there's a moment. There wasn't a moment. There was a woman at a kitchen table with a binder in front of her that she'd spent 22 weeks and $1,320 building, realizing that every page in it was about a decision that had already been made without her. She'd been documenting a woman who was already gone. Gary was in the doorway. I don't know how long he'd been there. I told you in June to just ask her, he said, not to me. He didn't look at me once. I said it in this room. I said, Corinne, go ask your sister. Then he went out through the garage. I got my coat. Corinne was still sitting down, and when I was almost to the front room, she said it, and there was nothing left in her voice at all. What am I supposed to do on Tuesdays? I stopped with my hand on the back of the chair. Whatever I've been doing, I said. I never once told you what that was. She looked at me. That part's mine. I went on the 18th. I want that understood. Nobody made me. I put on the blue sweater my mother used to say was good on me. I bought flowers at the grocery store on Sunshine. I got to Ellendale at noon, and Denise and Karen came at 12:15 with a card, and we had lemon cake and sang to a woman who didn't know why we were singing but liked it anyway. The binder never came out of the closet. Alma had about 10 good minutes, right at the end, over the cake. She looked at Corinne and said, Jeanette, don't let him carry that by himself. And Jeanette has been dead since 1987, and was our aunt. My sister's hands started going, and I sat where I was. 11 years I've watched for that and stepped in front of it. I'd start talking. I'd ask Mum about the dog in 1954, or I'd get up and take her plate, and the moment would pass over Corinne's head like weather. I didn't do it. I put my fork down and let my sister sit in it. And after about 40 seconds, she took a breath and said, It's Corinne, Mama. And Mum said, Well, of course it is. Pleasant as anything. And it was over. That was the whole revenge, if anybody wants to call it that. I stopped standing in front of her. The next 5 days I spent building the thing I should have built in year 2. I wrote it all out. Not the shoebox, the other part. The part that was only ever in my head. The medication list in plain language, with what each one is actually for and what it looks like when it isn't working. The recertification, with February circled, and the packet's arrival window, and the fact that it takes about 9 hours, and you should do it over 3 evenings, not one. The 3 numbers at Ridgeline that actually get answered, and the 2 that don't. Dr. Nasser's nurse, who is the real door, and at the bottom the last line. If she gets agitated in the evening, put a warm mug in her hands. It doesn't have to have anything in it. Nobody knows that but me. I found it out 4 years ago by accident, and I never wrote it down anywhere, because I never thought I'd have to hand her over. I printed 2 copies, one for Corinne, one for the file at the front desk. She called me in November, on a Thursday, at 11:40 at night. There'd been a bad week. Mom had gotten out of bed twice, and there was a urinary infection, which is what it usually is, and the facility had called Corinne at 10 and again at 11:15. My sister was crying so hard, I had to ask her twice to slow down. I need you to come, she said. Margot, I can't do this part. I need you to come. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. Everything in me stood up and reached for the car keys. Every single thing. 11 years of muscle. My coat was on the chair. I'm here, I said. Tell me what they told you. And I listened for a long time. I got the whole call out of her the way I've gotten 10,000 calls out of people. One question at a time, in order. No jumping ahead. Then I told her it was an infection, that it does exactly this every time, that it looks like the end of the world and it isn't. I told her the second number on the list gets answered after 10. I told her to ask for a urinalysis by name, so it doesn't sit until morning. Will you come tomorrow? No. She was quiet. You can do this, I said. And I meant it. That's the part I'd want anybody to know. It wasn't a punishment, and I wasn't withholding. I have watched that woman handle a flooring showroom, 2 children, and a husband with a ruptured disc. Corinne, you can do this. I hung up, and I sat there with my coat on the chair for about an hour. That was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I have sat on a phone line with a woman on Kimbrough at 3 in the morning. She went 19 times between October and March. I know because Dana mentioned it once, sideways, the way she does. She isn't good at it. She still stands half in the hallway. Mum still calls her by our aunt's name about a third of the time, and it still takes something out of her every single visit. She goes anyway. That's more than I ever gave her credit for, and less than I'd have done, and both of those things are just true. The apology came in March, by text, 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. I shouldn't have hired that girl. I've thought about it every day since. I'm sorry, Margot. That's it. That's the whole thing. Nothing about believing Mom. Nothing about the file at Ridgeline, or the phone call to Bev, or the ramp priced out for a woman who walks 3/4 of a mile before breakfast. I looked at it a long while. Then I wrote back, "Thank you for saying it," and I put the phone down. She gave me what she had. I've decided that's allowed to be the end of it. I'm 68 years old. I have spent my whole life waiting for a complete accounting from people who don't keep books, and I'm not doing that anymore. I never learned Rayna's last name. I thought about that for a while. 22 weeks that woman watched me, and I couldn't have written her name on an envelope. But I had the address off the payment screen. She turned around at the pond that morning, a house number on Weaver. So in February, I mailed a Heron Field guide there, addressed it to Sadie, care of the house number, just the first name. I found the green Heron plate, and in the left margin beside it, in pencil, I wrote, "The only way I know how to say anything." 6:50 to 8:15 in the morning, North Bank, where the runoff comes in. Stand still. He'll come back. I didn't sign it. She'll know. The clock went to Ridgeline in December. It hangs on the wall opposite my mother's chair now, where she can see it. That yellow plastic sunburst, with the crack running up through the 7. The activities director asked if I'd rather have the good one from the gift shop. Mom looked up at it the first day and said, "That's from the house." She was right. She's the only person left alive who knows what that clock is, and she's the one who can't hold my name half the time. I've stopped trying to make sense of that. It's just how it is. I got to Bull Shoals on the 29th of March. The site is number 4, near enough to the water that you hear it at night, far enough that you don't worry. Bev came in a day later with a truck full of things nobody needs, and opinions about the fish cleaning station. My shift is 6 to noon at the host stand. Registrations, firewood, telling people where the ice is, telling other people that quiet hours start at 10, and meaning it. The loop trail here is 1.1 miles. It goes out along the shoreline and comes back through Oak. I walk it at 7. The first morning of April, about 2/3 of the way around, there was a green heron on the north bank of a cove, standing in 6 inches of water, right where a little runoff creek comes in, absolutely still. Not mine. A different bird on a different water, a long way from a municipal pond in Springfield, Missouri. I stood there and watched him a long while anyway. I got the notepad out of my coat pocket when I got back to the site. I wrote, "Heron, North Bank," in the middle of the page. And then I closed it and left the margin empty for the first time in 42 years.